Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this Heritage Day edition of News Reviews and Analysis. I'm Khadija Davis, and don't worry, you'll still be hearing Tashriq Trubody's voice, but that's because he's one of the guests for this discussion. Tashriq, welcome to this Heritage edition of News Reviews and Analysis.
Shukra very much for having me.
So he, of course, is the station manager of Radio 786. He's joined by his predecessor and current brand and communications manager. That's Rushni Ali. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And one of the, I'm going to call you one of the founding station managers. Amin Ahmed as well joining us. Shukran so much for your time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah.
So we're dedicating this Heritage Day program to the heritage of Radio 786 and the role that the station has played, I think, also in cultivating the fabric that is Cape Town and I think the community media landscape. And as, of course, we're marking 30 years of broadcasting. Tashriq, I want to start with you. What is the status of the community media landscape? I mean, you're on several boards. How do you see it?
Well, it's layered. I mean, it is a tough one. It's been tough for I think since inception, and that's largely because community broadcasters struggle with building sustainability, and that's largely premised on income that's generated through advertising. And when to begin with, there aren't a lot of funds available. The struggle is, how do you hold on to your talent? How do you retain staff? How do you build capacity within the organization? And so it's a symbiotic relationship that if the one isn't there, the other struggles. And so I think it's true for most community broadcasters, and for Radio 786 in particular. I mean, it's been part of our struggle, and that struggle is also sometimes whether you say it's complicated or whether we take comfort in the fact that there's a principle, and that principle then is also conditioned on where you take your advertising from. But I do believe there are workarounds it. There are ways to work around it, and alhamdulillah for Radio 786 we are not in the best of position, but with the mercy of the creator and the hard work of the team, the lights get paid, staff get their salaries paid, and the test then always will be, how do you raise funds through not just advertising, through other means, to not just build sustainability but provide some sort of a protection for the work that you're doing. So there's a very businessy type answer that I can give you, but on a more I suppose everyday making ends meet, for community broadcasters it is a really tough terrain. There's not a lot of business or advertising that's coming from government. For instance, government used to spend most of their advertising on the bigger media houses, and there's been a campaign by community broadcasters to get government to spend at least 30% of their advertising budgets with community radio. That fight is still an ongoing fight. There are limitations with funding that comes from the MDDA. There are limitations with funding that comes from agencies, etc. And to give you almost a real example of the sustainability that's lacking, is that stations can qualify for advertising, but if they do not have the necessary competencies to have the proper skills, including getting registered on government's central supply database, because they need to be SARS compliant and tax compliant, and if they don't have those skills internally, it threatens the sustainability of the organization. So, in short, it looks challenging but equally promising, because radio has survived and community radio continues to survive.
I want to turn now to Rushni and Amin. Maybe I can start with Rushni. Just taking in what Tashriq was saying now, and how does it then compare to your time at Radio 7? Of course, there were challenges and there were things that you also had to deal with. But looking at where community media is now to your time, Rushni.
Okay, so I think when it comes to the financial resources, that hasn't changed because I served for almost 13 years, and that was also a very big part of something like almost like a necessary evil, if I could put it in that way. I think during my time also one of the biggest challenges is that, which Tashriq gets very easy away with this, is that we had a lot of complaints.
Okay.
And there was one person in particular in the Muslim community that made sure that Radio 786's management always had to work when it came to complaints. I think people were also settling in, even though it was almost 10 years later. But people were still very much picky about things that seemed like a non-issue, but it was important to them. Like if your adhan was still 30 seconds late. The amount of times that people during my time would complain about something like that, as insignificant as it might seem, right now, and I see they hardly do it now unless it's Ramadan. But those were like the things, the dynamics within the Muslim community. I got a bit of a taste of the early days of the Paget era, so a lot of complaints around that. The case was still on, the Sajbot case was still very much on, so a lot of what we had to do was focused in that direction. And then I think it was settling in. So Amin did a good job in processes when it came to the financial aspect of the radio station. There's, I think, up till today, we're still using some of the things that he's put in place. But there were a lot of things around the human resources aspect and about managing talent and just having individuals that is able to do the job, because at the beginning stages of the radio station there were a lot of people that did a hell of a lot of good things because of heart and giving their time, but at some point it became a career. And there's also where the challenge came in, because in the early days there was a lot of stipend stuff. I think we could count on our one hand. I mean, how many staff were actually full-time paid staff, right? So there was a lot of stipend stuff. So in my era, a lot of that now came to play, because people then now had careers. There were job opportunities, so to say, and it wasn't just like if I take somebody that had particular skills, like an academic that was giving back to the radio because he believes this is part of what he was doing, or the housewife, like, and somebody like Zubaida Idris comes to mind. Fatima Ali. Those were all people that were at home and wanted to give back, you know. And so a lot of that shifted, and it was more focused on careers now and job opportunities.
So, I mean, of course, you come from the time when it was, I'm going to refer to it as the glory days, because as Rishi said, the people were doing it for the cause. They were there with a purpose. So surely the energy here must have been so different.
Indeed, it was. But let me just, it's interesting if we're starting off with resourcing. And so just to take a step back, at the inception of the radio, all financing fell under the Islamic Unity Convention, the IUC. And during my time, we did the separation where there was a Radio 706 bank account distinct from the IUC. And that's a very important issue to note, because the Broadcasting Authority had no interest in the IUC. Its interest was, what is the radio doing? And the radio needs to report on its finances separately. And so that began under my time. So I was involved with Ali Adams in ensuring that separation takes place, and that henceforth, I think when Rushni came on board, it was already a separate radio entity that was in charge of its own finances. And that's a very important point, because, you know, Tashriq it speaks about the radio raising funds, but actually we need to also tap into the fact that the radio has been raising funds. It has its own account, and this account got hijacked. And in that way, the radio lost its financial resources, and currently that account is still frozen. That investment account is still frozen. So we mustn't gloss over the realities. The radio has been quite successful in being able to raise funds, and the situation it finds itself in is actually an own goal being scored within the organization. You know, so we can't ignore that. You know, so it's for the people who put in the hard work to enable those funds to come. It's a huge disappointment. I'm one of those people. You know, I'm one of those people that went out on the road to go and collect funds for Radio 786. You know, And that was being out of our homes, being on the road, etc., to collect those funds. The people who engineered the removal of the funds from the radio account, they were not on the road doing that hard work. So I just want to put that into context.
Rishni, that happened under your, I'm not going to say under your watch, but it happened while you were the station manager. And I
Yeah.
mean, how did you rally the team together
Oh.
knowing that had happened?
I think very importantly, before I answer that, is that just to say that, as the Sharik alluded, the problem is an industry problem.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that it's something that's challenging for us, but there's never been a moment where the staff didn't get paid their salaries. So I think we must just make that very clear.
Yeah.
When we say it's difficult, it's because most probably it could have been so much easier for other, like some of the other radio stations. Because what also held us back wasn't just some of the things that Armin mentioned, but it's also the fact that the radio has very high values, models, and standards. And part of that meant that we weren't taking certain businesses' money. So it wasn't that we weren't putting the work in. It wasn't that advertising didn't see the value of what the product is that we're producing. It wasn't that people weren't benefiting from the content that this organization was producing. It was the fact that we had our own limitations as well. That even when a particular business would come to us and say, here's 25,000 Rand a month, we would say, sorry, but we don't do business with organizations like yourself or businesses like yourself. So I think that is just very important. But in terms of rallying the troops, we've always had an open door policy. So transparency from both management, ordinary and board level. Those discussions, we had those discussions in our staff room. There were no hidden secrets. So the staff always understood the importance of where we're at and where we're moving towards. And I think when that is your attitude to how you're running your business or your organization, it's very easy to rally troops because they understand the bigger picture. Yes, and thankfully so, a lot of businesses outside of the Western Cape help us with our court case and to finance our court case. But there were also people that understood the importance of it and admired an organization like Radio 786, that we were that transparent that even if it was going against ourselves, that we were able to still navigate the situation. And I'd say, alhamdulillah, still survive it 30 years later.
Alhamdulillah.
You think about the buzz of the radio.
Yeah.
So and you refer to the glory days. I think for me the first 3 years of the radio's broadcasting was probably the let's say the highest energy levels. The community radio was a novelty, and the whole community was behind the initiative. A lot of energy, great deal of support. Yes, I mean the place was a buzz. I think that year 4 is still my period, but I think that year 4 and year 5 there was a dip in our level of quality and producing, etc. But that's the novelty effect wearing off, and now it just becomes real business. It is running an organization every day. And sometimes that can be quite mundane, but mundaneness is part of life.
You mentioned those things because I think we talk about financing and so that we can ensure that this machine keeps running. But of course, the other side of that is having the skills and having the people to do that. And community radio plays a special role in that. We're taking people off the street with no skills, and suddenly we're able to sit in this room. A child came fresh out of high school, learns to do a sound on the board and is now filming us. So we're seeing all of those things coming to the fore. How do you keep that aspect of community radio alive? I'm going to just stick with Rishi and I'll come to you after that, Ashrik.
So how do you keep that alive? I think we haven't changed how we do things. And Amin spoke about the vibe and the energy. I think that still exists today. Maybe differently, but it definitely still exists today. I mean, the staff that works here, majority of them, they still do it because they believe and love this organization. So, and part of that is, in answering your question is that training and developing individuals or the community that we're serving has always been a priority. It was never just about putting a program on air. You know, for a lot of radio stations, there's no dead air.
Yeah.
That's a given at 786, and the quality that goes with it. But with that is always empowering the people and taking them with you. And I think that has been a success story for us. That somebody that was in nappies, because we saw a photo of him, is now, like you say, is the social media person at Radio 786. Our own Tashriq Trubody, yourself, Khadija, when you
Yeah.
guys joined, you were part of Ethiopia. That was all part of your development, especially Tashriq. That was all part of your development. And we created, and this is why I love this institution so much, they created that space. Yes, kudos to Tashriq. I think in the last 8 years, he has focused more on the business side of the organizations, which is brilliant. Therefore, we could see that the expo grew so exponentially when it was started in my time, but it's now a totally different vehicle in terms of how the corporates that we've invited to as part of it. So with each one of us, even there was a time or a skill or something that came, but we never lost our energy to take our staff with us, to empower them, to take people, ordinary people. You know, there was a time when we were thinking, if we changing the NRA presenter, or if we're looking for this one for drive time, who is it? And there were some heavyweight names that were
Yeah.
thrown around. And the reality was that we said that anybody could buy that talent. But what makes 786 so special is that we developed that talent.
Yeah.
So when a Bonteheuwel boy came and his mommy actually came
made him volunteer.
and said, can he come and train here? And then his mommy was too cute because she came back and she said, he seems to lean more towards bush radio. Can you not change that? But the fact that the space is allowed within an institution like Radio 786 to say, we're recognizing the talent. Let's hone in. Let's help him get where he needs to be. That decision is still his to make. And obviously, it was bonus for us when he said he'd like to stay beyond his school. But today, he's the station manager. And for me, that speaks to some of the successes.
And now you can't get rid of him.
Really.
It's Radio 786 on 100.4 FM. This is our Heritage Day edition of News Reviews and Analysis. I'm in conversation with Tashriq Trubody, Amin Ahmed, and Rushni Ali. Rushni is going to take a break from us, so shukran so much for her insights this morning. Tashriq, I wanted to come to you on when Rushni was talking about skills development and cultivating those skills. We're now seeing Radio 786 move from a radio broadcaster on 100.4 FM on alternate days to now being a media house. Some would ask, why would a radio station, especially a community radio station,
Yeah.
feel that this is a ocean that we can play in?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest with you. You know, it started out of a crisis moment, and the one thing that I've learned here at Radio 786 is that, you know, with every crisis, you know, there's opportunity. I know it sounds like a cliche, but there's some truth in that. 2017, around about then, we had one of the crazy episodes of you know, my own experiences at 786, and there's been a couple. You know, we used to host a health fair when one day a tap blew off and the entire station got flooded, and it was a crazy night. And there's so many of those types
Yeah.
of
We laugh now.
you know, moments. But there was one of the nights where in the control room a computer went down, and you know, it was an audio processor, and we spent, you know, several hours trying to figure what on earth is going on, and we couldn't get on air. It was not a Centec, which is the signal distributor's problem. It was a challenge on our end, and having called in a couple of people, it was a real struggle to figure it out. Keeping in mind that a lot of the the institutional knowledge, left with the passing of people like Uncle Akbar and very many others. And that, I mean, was part of our challenge then. How do you build institutional capacity, but also, ensure that knowledge, goes on to, how do you succession plan? And that's, alhamdulillah, one of the things that we've been able to overcome. But back to 2017, where this dramatic incident happens and we're off air for a couple of hours, upon having figured out what the problem was. It then required, through that crisis moment, and this is now thanks to the leadership of our chairperson, Alimia Chikte, that we embarked on a process to upgrade our studios. And then it used to be like 3-4 studios built in one. And we set out a vision for what we wanted the studio to be. And at that stage already, we realized that there is this creeping new media that's on the rise. And we set forth a plan. We didn't know where it was going to go, to build in this new studio that we're sitting today, that we began to change the terminology. It's our broadcast centers, not just a radio studio, because now we've built a TV set in the studio. We've built and designed the studio to be able to, compensate for new forms of media and what form and shape that will take. And part of that was to develop a strategy, and that strategy started with, training our in-house staff, brought in the necessary skills to be able to train and transfer those skills. Then it took some time to either raise money or save the money to be able to buy the infrastructure. So a fancy piece of equipment like a computer that would be able to facilitate that, the software required, and slowly started building the capacity to be able to offset the supposed threat to radio and traditional radio. And what we've come to not realize, but we've positioned ourselves to say that radio is still our primary core. It's still the primary work that we do. I mean, there's having a very raw, very real time conversation with a guest, and then have a listener react to that. There's nothing that can easily replace that. But how do you repurpose content? How do you polish your content in a slightly better way, and have it available on all the other platforms where the consumer finds themselves? So we have to go to where the consumer is. And so the product didn't change. We didn't create bubblegum radio. It started off very slowly in building a social media presence and a brand, and through that we viewed it as this particular plan, similar to almost the convergence of medias, the convergence of the traditional with the new, and alhamdulillah, which is why today, without sounding cocky or arrogant, we outpacing what, I don't like calling them competitors, because we believe that there's a space for everyone. We all have our own unique brand, and we offer a similar service. But it is why today those platforms are performing as alhamdulillah as good as it is. So what started out as a crisis moment that was purely just audio, gave birth to a new approach to how we do media, and it wasn't an overnight thing. This is 2017. Up until last year, we're still buying bits and pieces of equipment, and that speaks to, again, the strength of Radio 786. People would come in here and think, oh, there's all this fancy equipment, or there's this, that, and the other. No, we've worked very hard for it, and we've worked over a period of time, and it's informed by an actual strategy. It's not all over the place, this, that, and the other. And so that really is, I think, testament to the leadership of the team that we have here. And this entire strategy is not only just driven by the leadership team. It's young people that have designed the studio, that have involved in how we package this, that, and the other, looked at what's trendy. It's involving so many different voices in that space to be able to build this new strategy.
I mean, yeah.
I want to just comment on that.
Yeah.
I think there's a very important issue that's being raised here, is that when we go back to the origin of the radio, we were still working with cassettes and tape recorders,
and pencils.
Pencils, lining up the adverts to be in the correct spot. So I remember being in the studio, and there's Babu, tweaking like 30, 40 different cassettes
Yeah.
with adverts which needed to be played. But what is important here is that this growth is about the baton being handed over, younger people coming in, newer faces, newer voices coming in, and changing the feel of the radio. That's important, because we can't be station managers for life. So I had my time, I did my turn, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still engaged with the radio, but it's not 30 years later that guy was a station manager way back in the 1990s. He's still the station manager. It's important that we're bringing young people, and you can see the impact. I mean, and Rushni is correct. There's a lovely vibe within the radio when you listen to it. You can hear the energy of the young people. You can feel the changes that have come, and that only happens if you an open organization that allows people to come on board and influence the direction of how things take place at the radio station. So kudos to Radio 76 and its management for being that open.
Oh, actually, wanted to touch on that was because you've come from being a station manager to then becoming a listener. Even though you have more inroads than others in terms of connection with the staff. But how do you think the Radio 786 listener has progressed with us over the past 30 years?
That's I've been thinking about that question all the time. It's in fact a very difficult question to deal with. So I'm maybe going to use another radio station as an example. So let's say in your younger teenage years, you listen to, it was then called Radio Good Hope, and now I think it's called Good Hope FM. And then you transition to KFM, which was a station that was formed after Good Hope.
Yeah.
And so you see a developmental pattern. So in my younger days, I was a teeny bopper. I'm listening to Good Hope. As I'm maturing, getting older, I'm now listening to KFM, and KFM then captures that segment of the audience. I think it's very difficult for Radio 786 because fundamentally we are a Muslim community radio station, and yes, our listeners grow, or I shouldn't say our, but their listeners grow, and but where do they transition to? So the radio finds itself in quite a difficult position. It's how do you, on the one hand, grow your audience, new people coming in, at the same time retain those listeners that you have, and it's not easily done. So I'm going to kind of share a kind of anecdotal story where one of my aunts, who's now almost close to 90 years old, when I kind of went to the house and they're listening to the other Muslim radio station, and I'm a bit confused. I'm trying to understand where this comes from, And then I was chatting with my cousins and stuff, and they mentioned, they said, no, the mom would say that 786, that is the field politic, and it reflects a transition where someone who's now close onto that 90-year period, they just want to listen to Kira. They want to listen to, in inverted commas, religious programs. They don't want the let's say the robustness of a political focus.
Okay.
And Radio 786 has always been very current affairs focused. I think it's retained that. So from a programming point of view, it's retained that dimension of its broadcasting over the years, and the other developments, because I'm not part of it. I think it's the way you as a radio station have learned to understand the listenership and define new programs that are required. So unfortunately, I'm not a listener across the spectrum. I'm very much a current affairs person. So I listen to NRA, I listen to On the Agenda, I listen to Prime Talk, etc. And my focus is always there, and it's like, is 706 still staying the course in its political focus? And glad to report it is. And,
But I think that's a very interesting observation because, uh, you know, on the one end, if you look at, for instance, our afternoon drive time show that has a bit of a youthful touch to it at the moment, it's trying to tap into those audiences. We did a little. Just you know, there's no real scientific application to it, but we did an assessment of the type of listeners that are engaging, because engagement is sort of where you get a proper sense of what's going on. Silent listeners, I guess we'll never know, but you know, in that engagement, there's a greater you know, a greater pattern of younger listeners that are engaging. So when I refer to younger, I'm not referring to 16-year-olds. I'm talking about, you know, 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds, because that is your new listenership. Those are the people that are settling in their careers. They are settling down, potentially have families, etc. Those are your clients of tomorrow that's going to come to your fundraising events like your Ramadan expos. And we see that even in the demographic of the event. Of course, yes, there are elderly folk that, you know, would journey with us and continue to journey with us, but it's trying to strike the balance in your content, and that balance extends itself also to, for instance, gender parity. You know, one of the whether it's a criticism or it's a good thing, depending on who you talk to, you know, it was always felt that the station was very female heavy, female driven, and while we don't necessarily want to look at content through the lens of gender though is an important part of the conversation. It is how Hadija Jam is able to facilitate a real complex, you know, domestic issue, you know, that only perhaps from a female perspective is so absent from the broader discourse. So putting together radio is a very deliberate exercise. It's how do you engineer conversation? How do you bring out the best in conversation? And sometimes, you know, we play up with things and you'll hear presenter changes. That's either because we're fighting across with the presenter or because we're looking at what is the proper mix that we want to achieve. And so it's an ongoing exercise. I won't pretend like there is a blueprint, because nobody can pretend there is a blueprint. Look at what's happening in commercial media. A voice that used to be on the radio many years ago has been recycled, brought back, and is now capturing an audience that either has nostalgia or an audience that prefers that sort of very wild character type radio. So it's an ongoing exercise to see what works, and I'm quite excited to be part of that.
But the other side of that is because 786 of course does these things the 786 way. So even when we are doing these changes, it's who's it benefiting and how is it benefiting.
Yes.
So when we use our various platforms like the social media platforms, our YouTube, 100.4 FM, how are we maintaining, I don't want to use soft power here, but maintaining that 786 way of thinking and causing people to think through those platforms?
For many years, when I was a youngster and growing up here at the radio, there was always talk about this infamous concept called the ethos, and I never could understand what is the ethos. You know, what do you refer to? Give me, like, what is understood by an ethos? And an ethos, you know, for me in more recent years, was defined as what is your company culture? What is the culture that you have? And even though you have, yes, younger people and new approaches, new ideas coming into the space, it fundamentally comes down to what is the makeup of this organization's culture, its brand, its focus, etc. And I'll give you actual real examples of where does 786 fit into the debate around LGBTQI plus. Where do we fit into the debate around you know, this big controversy that you see on social media around a young girl that, you know, transitioned into wanting to be a boy? How does 786 navigate youth males that no longer find relevance by going to mosque? You know, let's not, you know, hide about the fact that this is a reality. Or madrasas, how relevant is that? How do we teach, you know? And so these are conversations that we're part of, and we think very deeply about these things. When we put together our Ramadan programming, when we discuss when, for instance, now we've been running a series on second wives, you know, to be honest, quite tired of the discussion.
Up to
But
the,
it's something that needs navigation. And Amin once said this. I think 10 years ago he said this at a conference of the radio, where he said Radio 786 is uncomfortable radio. It only becomes uncomfortable because we talk about the things that sometimes people would pretend isn't quite there.
yeah.
But the reality is that we have to be able to bridge that gap. And I, whether you feel strongly about this, that, and the other, that's fine. But we are guided by Quran and Sunnah, and even at a time when the community tried to tear us into one direction or the other on Sunni Shia matters, it was those very crucial moments. So when you're confronted with LGBTQI and you're confronted with divisions around Sunni Shia, this, that, and the other, what is your culture? What is your ethos? What is it that centers you? And a lack of principle or lack of identity sometimes is where I think a lot of media and others go wrong, and even Muslim organizations. And so, in short, it's about understanding the brand, understanding the ethos, and everything else we can play around with. And so navigating that is crucially important, and it's a test. It really is an everyday struggle, because as much as there are newer people that are joining, younger people that are joining, it's then how do we, and you must be aware of this, recently we had a workshop where we
Yeah.
spoke about ethos in practice. How do you practice that? How do you apply that? So when you're putting together your program, who's my listener? What message am I hoping to drive? But even though, while I'm navigating a difficult issue around divisions within the Muslim community, around sectarian lines, the fundamental messaging for 786 is that Quran and Sunnah is sufficient. Everything else is a discussion.
Yeah.
And so, but there must be a space for that to happen. And I hope that Radio 786 continues to play that part.
I think the station still recognizes the level of responsibility that we take on when we walk into this building and what it is that we are putting out there. And I think for many, we started the conversation looking at finances and ensuring that the station keeps running. I'm going to want to come to you on that. In the early days, of course, it was a novelty community radio, and I think perhaps the packaging of that was, oh, it's a small little thing and everyone is just hobbling things together and trying to do something. How did you get community buy-in? And when I talk about community buy-in, I'm talking about our very powerful community businesses to invest in this radio station.
Nick, let me first say that we actually didn't hobble things together.
But I'm talking about
yeah.
the perception of
Yeah.
what community radio
Yeah,
is.
no, correct. There was proper organization to put out programs every day, every minute, every second. As you all know, is hard work.
Yes.
So there was proper organization from inception. Yes, some things fall through the cracks. They happen now as well. That's part of running an organization. I think the business dimension coming in. Fortunately, we think of someone like the late Habib Khan, who had a very good relationship with particularly the Muslim business community, was a big driver in the beginning and ensuring that we have advertisers on board. And if I go back to that period, there were different structures within the community that had a relationship with the IUC and with the radio that were fundamentally from the business community. So there was that relationship that existed from inception, and the support was there, but it was still hard work. It's not a case of that you're going to get money easily for businesses to invest. You've got to go knock on doors, and you've got to ask politely, and you've got to indicate how you're going to utilize those funds, etc., for the benefit of the radio and the community. But a great deal of work was put in the beginning. The relationship that was there at the start, those were all important. I think it's now changed in terms of a larger landscape of the financial sector. So targeting businesses beyond the Muslim community, working through advertising agencies, etc. So the landscape has changed in that regard. But we were again quite fortunate because it was the novel days where people out of their own accord would come forward and provide support. Yeah.
And Tashrik, of course, things have changed now, and I think it's also how Radio 786 sees itself also needs to translate into how our advertisers see Radio 786. So I think that is also one of the challenges that we are dealing with now. And I think it's not just Radio 786, but other media houses as well. How are we navigating that space now?
Look, it fundamentally comes down to what is your value proposition, and we haven't, I think, really played the numbers game, and we've seen how challenging that is. But it is true that for businesses, in the most, you look at where you can find value for your brand, where there's the most ears and the most eyes, and that is something that we've had to navigate and continue to try and navigate. The reality, though, is, with that being said, is that it's good to have principle, but not everybody understands your principle and buys into your principle. So yes, while we do not take don't take money from certain beverage companies, certain retail stores, etc. That's fine and good and well, and some may be sympathetic towards that and feel that this is where I'd want to advertise. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, is where does your purchasing power lie? If you look, for instance, at the Ramadan Expo, on average 20,000 or so people that come out, businesses that return yearly, traders that continue to grow, businesses that are actually making money, finding value for a big retail brand like a Spa, for instance, to attach their name at least for the last 5 years to the event, attracting corporates to advertise on radio. It's trusting a brand that know that you'll be able to gain value. Has there's researchers talk about measurement tools such as LSM, and I know there's often debates about these sorts of things, about how do you determine what that is. But the reality is that if you're running a business and you're advertising to 10 people, but the return on that investment is 1 to nothing, then are you spending your money in the correct way? And so when we talk then about that value proposition of 786, it is an audience with look, I mean, it's difficult to say with liquidity, because these days things are so tough and expensive to get by. But it is likely that you'll find a return on that investment by advertising with Radio 786 because of the listenership of Radio 786, and then of course the fact that it is a brand that's on the move. It's a brand that's not static. Looking at if we want to play the numbers game, then let's go to social media. Let's look at the reach and the extent, which is not always. I mean, today social media is the flavor of the day. A couple of years ago, remember we had NFTs and how quickly that died. But if you look, for instance, at how you sell and how you position yourself, you're selling traditional radio, sure, but you also have audiences that is on this new media, and so it requires us also then to change up the product and how we deliver that product. Because so yes, we can do the general outside broadcast, the 30-second spot, the this, that, and the other, but with the upskilling of the staff and the equipment that we have now, do you produce a video with that? How do you ensure that the client is able to get the best value for that investment that they make? So it's an all-encompassing effort. And in terms of the financial status of the organization, I mean, was talking earlier about the frozen money, which is still frozen, and inshallah we pray that we'll get access to that very, very, very soon, inshallah. But the point is that Radio 786 runs in a way, and alhamdulillah, maybe this is also due to the leadership of our chairman and the fiduciary duties that he imposes on us, that while yes, we we struggle from time to time, but when things are okay and fine, we are very frugal with how we spend the money. It's also part of realizing that this is waqf money. So no, we're not spending the money on unnecessary equipment, this, that, and the other, lavish, this, that, and the other. No. There's also a strong culture of saving, a strong culture of planning for a rainy day. It's about putting good business practice, putting good business into practice, and I think that's the mixture of of the staff that we have here. But again, it's not all rosy. Believe me, it's not. When a piece of equipment
Life
breaks
is
like it did the other day, and the technical department looks at me with teary eyes about we need a new mixer and we need a new sound card and we need to do this, that, and the other. All of that adds up, and it's money they didn't quite budget for. Remember, I said we our fiduciary duties and how we plan and we budget and we look at monthly targets. It's the business side of running a radio beyond just content. It's how do you then prepare for those eventualities, and so it's a balance that we try to continue to work on, inshallah.
Khadija, I think also we must be careful about that the investment by businesses is only from a perspective of them being able to sell their product and services.
Yeah.
We have to put on the agenda that there has to be a developmental focus as well. So businesses invest in the radio because it does good work. It's uplifting the community. It's allowing young people to gain skills in the media world. So sometimes you're approaching businesses from that perspective that they've got the funds and this is a good place to invest in because the money will be used for the developmental purpose. So it's not only about the advertising ROI component. So we have to in some ways sometimes redefine when we speak about return on investment. So it's a return on investment for the radio as well. That if you invest your money here to see this kind of growth, are you seeing people coming and being trained? Are you seeing the radio growing in terms of its technology, how it does stuff, etc.? So you're calling on businesses to invest in the radio with a developmental agenda as well.
Yeah.
How do you see Radio 786 progressing for the next, I'm not going to say the next 30 years, let's say the next 10 years, because media is what media is. Where do you foresee radio, Tashik, if you can, in 30 seconds?
Sure.
Okay, there's your answer. I mean,
I think it just remains a competitive landscape. The whole aspect of social media, podcasts, you've got to be watching every element of what you are doing, behind you, on your sides, in front of you, and most importantly is keep young people on board to assist with meeting the challenges of the future.
Yeah, I just want to say, I felt like it was a bit of a big question, but and when people ask us, so what's next year? Television? No, that you must know what your limitations are. You must know what space you're playing in, and then how do you refine that? How do you make it more polished? How do you make it better? And I think that's our focus here. And so this convergence of media that I spoke to you about, that is our focus at the moment, and inshallah, we'd like to grow in other spheres, non-broadcasting spheres, but I won't reveal too much about that right now. So lots to come beyond the 30 years, inshallah.
Yeah, there's lots planned for the 30th anniversary year going into 2026. So shukran to Tashriq Trubari, our current Radio 786 station manager, Amin Ahmed, of course, one of our station managers, and earlier we were joined by Rushni Ali. I'm Khadija Davids, and this is how we wrap up this morning's edition, a heritage edition of News Reviews and Analysis. Assalamu alaikum.